The air on Trion 7 was heavy with an unrelenting stillness, broken only by the faint hum of the wind that carried dust across the barren landscape. Ethan Kael adjusted his visor, the lens flickering as it scanned the desolate horizon. For all its bleakness, this planet held the promise of answers. Answers that could rewrite the narrative of humanity's place in the galaxy. A xenoarchaeologist by trade and a former military officer by necessity, Ethan had spent years chasing myths and whispers. Now, for the first time, he was on the cusp of something real. "Ethan, you've got to see this," Dr. Lira Volen called from the excavation site. Her voice crackled through the comms, her tone tinged with excitement. Ethan descended the ridge to join her, the crunch of his boots muted by the soft dust. Around them, a team of workers and researchers moved with coordinated urgency, their tools and scanners working in harmony to unearth what lay beneath. Lira stood near an exposed section of what appeared to be a massive metallic structure, its surface smooth and unmarred by time. "Initial scans confirm it's not native to Trion 7, Lira said, her eyes alight with fascination. "The material isn't listed in any known galactic database either." Ethan knelt beside the exposed section, running a gloved hand over its surface. The metal was cool to the touch, even under the planet's harsh sunlight. Strange symbols etched into the surface glowed faintly, their patterns too deliberate to be random. "Ancient humanity," Ethan murmured, his voice almost reverent. "It has to be." Lira raised an eyebrow. "You're sure? The scale of this structure, it suggests a civilization far beyond anything humans were supposed to have achieved." "That's what they'd like us to believe," Ethan replied. "But look at the craftsmanship, the language. This isn't alien. It's ours." As he spoke, a vibration pulsed through the ground, faint at first but growing stronger. The excavation team froze, their tools falling silent. Then, with a groaning noise that seemed to echo from the planet's core, a massive section of the ground collapsed, revealing a cavernous void below. Ethan and Lira exchanged a glance before securing their harnesses. Moments later, they descended into the darkness, their headlamps piercing the thick shadows. What they found took their breath away. The cavern stretched endlessly, its walls lined with rows of massive, dormant machines that hummed faintly with residual energy. Towers of crystalline structures reached toward the ceiling, their surfaces reflecting the light in prismatic hues. At the center of the cavern was a colossal spire, its peak glowing with a pulsing blue light. It was unmistakable. This was a city, built with technology far beyond even the most advanced alien civilizations known to the galaxy. "This isn't just a city," Lira whispered. "It's a fortress." Ethan approached a raised platform at the base of the spire, where a console jutted out from the ground. Its interface was covered in the same glowing symbols they had seen above, but this time they pulsed rhythmically, as if waiting for input. "Careful," Lira warned. "We don't know what that does." Ethan placed his hand on the console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cavern came alive. Lights flared to life across the city, illuminating the massive machines and structures in stark detail. The humming grew louder, resonating through the air. The console emitted a holographic projection, a figure clad in ornate armor, its features distinctly human. The projection's gaze swept across the room before it spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "To those who find this place, know that you stand in the remnants of humanity's greatest age. We were the architects of peace, the guardians of the stars. But betrayal from within and without cast us down. Beware those who seek to erase us, for they fear what we once were, and what we may become again." The projection flickered, and then the console displayed a map of the galaxy, marked with dozens of points. One of them, glowing brighter than the rest, was Trion 7. Another, farther away, pulsed in red. "What does that mean?" Lira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means there's more out there," Ethan said, his mind racing. "This isn't just a city, it's a message, a warning." Before they could say more, a shrill alarm pierced the cavern. The console displayed a new image. Several ships entering the planet's atmosphere, their trajectories converging on their location. Dravak ships, Lira said, her face pale. They found us. Ethan clenched his fists. The Dravak Dominion was one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, known for its ruthlessness and its obsession with controlling ancient artifacts. If they realized the significance of this discovery, they would stop at nothing to destroy it, and anyone who stood in their way. "Seal the entrance," Ethan ordered, his military instincts taking over. "We can't let them reach the ruins." The team scrambled to comply, activating the ancient mechanisms that controlled the cavern's defenses. Massive doors slid shut and energy shields flared to life, but Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before the Dravak forces breached them. "We have to go deeper," he said, motioning for Lira to follow. "There has to be more down here, something we can use." The two of them made their way toward the central spire, where the holographic map had indicated a hidden chamber. The path was treacherous, with collapsing walkways and unstable machinery, but they pressed on, driven by a shared sense of urgency. When they reached the chamber, they found another console, this one larger and more intricate than the first. It was surrounded by rows of cylindrical devices, each one glowing faintly. Ethan activated the console, and another holographic figure appeared, this time showing a battle, a great fleet of human ships clashing with alien armadas. The scene was chaotic, but one detail stood out: a massive weapon, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, capable of obliterating entire fleets in a single strike. "This is what they feared," Lira said, "humanity's power." "And it's still here," Ethan replied, "buried, waiting." Before they could analyze the information further, the cavern shook violently. The Dravak ships had begun their assault, and the ruins wouldn't hold much longer. "Take everything you can," Ethan said, downloading the data to a portable drive. "We're going to need it." As they prepared to leave, the holographic figure spoke again, its voice grave but resolute. "To reclaim the past is to shape the future. Protect this knowledge, or all will be lost." Ethan nodded, more to himself than the projection. This was more than an archaeological discovery. It was a fight for humanity's survival. The ruins trembled as explosions echoed from above, sending showers of dust and debris raining down. Ethan Kael and Dr. Lira Volen sprinted through the cavern's labyrinthine corridors, their portable data drives tucked securely into their gear. Behind them, the rhythmic pounding of the Dravak Dominion's forces grew louder, accompanied by the occasional screech of alien metal grinding against ancient human architecture. "We're not going to make it if we keep moving blind," Lira panted, her voice strained. She glanced at her wrist scanner, its interface flickering erratically from the interference of the ruins' residual energy. "This place is a maze." "That's why we've got to outthink them," Ethan replied, his tone steady despite the chaos. His visor displayed a rudimentary map of the ruins, pieced together from the data they had downloaded. "If I'm right, there's a secondary access tunnel ahead. It should take us to the surface." Lira gave him a sharp look. "And if you're wrong?" "We don't get a second chance," Ethan shot back. "We move." The two pressed forward, ducking through collapsed passageways and leaping over exposed conduits that crackled with arcs of energy. The deeper they went, the more apparent it became that the ruins were alive in their own way. Lights flickered on and off, and faint mechanical hums echoed through the walls. It felt as though the ancient city was watching them, waiting. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. The Dravak soldiers were relentless, their heavy boots clanging against the metal floors. Ethan knew the Dominion wasn't just here to kill them. They were here to erase every trace of what had been discovered. To the galaxy's most powerful empires, humanity's lost legacy wasn't just a threat. It was an existential crisis. Ethan and Lira turned a corner and came to an abrupt halt. Ahead, a group of Dominion bounty hunters blocked the path, their insectoid frames glinting in the dim light. Their mandibles clicked menacingly as they raised plasma rifles. "Cover!" Ethan barked, shoving Lira behind a nearby support beam. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, their heat scorching the walls. Ethan drew his own weapon, a compact energy pistol, firing precise shots at the bounty hunters. The ancient ruins' reflective surfaces scattered the glow of the firefight, turning the corridor into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. "These guys don't miss!" Lira shouted, clutching her own weapon but keeping her head low. "They don't need to," Ethan replied grimly. "They just have to keep us here until reinforcements show up." A low rumble interrupted the exchange, and the walls around them began to shift. Panels slid open, revealing dormant drones that sprang to life with an ominous hum. The ancient technology, seemingly triggered by the heat of battle, unleashed bursts of energy at the bounty hunters, who scrambled to take cover. "Looks like the ruins don't like uninvited guests," Lira muttered, peering around the edge of the beam. "Let's hope they can't tell the difference between us and them," Ethan said. "Move!" Taking advantage of the distraction, Ethan and Lira sprinted past the confused bounty hunters, who were too preoccupied with fending off the drones to give chase. The corridor widened into a massive chamber, its walls lined with towering statues of armored figures. Each one held a different weapon, their poses conveying both power and vigilance. "This must have been a command hall," Lira said, marveling at the scale of the room. "Look at the detail. They weren't just soldiers, they were guardians." "Then we'd better hope they left behind more than statues," Ethan replied, his eyes scanning the chamber for exits. He spotted an elevated platform on the far side of the room, its surface glowing faintly. A console rested at its center, similar to the ones they had seen earlier. "Up there," he said, motioning to Lira. As they climbed the platform, the sounds of battle from the corridor faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Ethan activated the console, and a series of glyphs lit up across its surface. A deep vibration pulsed through the room, and the statue's eyes began to glow. Ethan?" Lira said nervously, backing away from the console. "What did you just do?" The statues stepped down from their pedestals, their movements slow but deliberate. Their weapons, once decorative, now crackled with energy. The closest statue turned its glowing gaze toward Ethan, and for a moment he braced himself for an attack. Instead, the statue lowered its weapon and extended a massive hand. A holographic map projected from its palm, displaying a clear path through the ruins. It pulsed faintly, indicating urgency. "They're guiding us," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. "They recognize us." Lira stared at the statues, her disbelief evident. "They think we're like them?" "Not just like them," Ethan said. "We are them. Or at least, we're what's left of them." The statues formed a protective formation around the platform, their movements precise and coordinated. One of them motioned toward the map, its glowing eyes fixed on Ethan. "Let's not keep them waiting," Ethan said, leading Lira down the path illuminated by the hologram. The route took them deeper into the ruins, where the architecture grew even more intricate. They passed through vast halls lined with murals depicting scenes of ancient humanity's triumphs. Massive fleets exploring distant stars, alien allies standing beside human leaders, and a final, harrowing image of betrayal, a council chamber in flames surrounded by shadowy figures. "That must have been the fall," Lira said quietly, tracing the mural with her hand. "Our allies turned on us." "And erased us from history," Ethan finished. "But why?" "Maybe we got too powerful," Lira suggested. "Too dangerous." "Or maybe we were the only ones who could stop them," Ethan said. "And they couldn't risk it." Their conversation was cut short by another explosion, this one closer than before. The Dravak forces had breached the inner defenses and were closing in fast. Ethan's visor chimed with a warning. Multiple hostiles detected. "Time's up," Ethan said, gripping his weapon. "We need to get out of here." As if on cue, the path ahead opened into another chamber. At its center was a massive circular door, its surface covered in the same glowing glyphs they had seen throughout the ruins. The statues following them moved to the door, pressing their hands against its surface. Slowly, it began to slide open, revealing a tunnel bathed in faint blue light. "Go," Ethan urged Lira. "I'll cover you." "What about you?" she asked, hesitating. "I'll be right behind you," Ethan promised. Lira nodded and sprinted through the tunnel, clutching her scanner tightly. Ethan held his ground as the first wave of Dravak's soldiers entered the chamber. The ancient statues immediately engaged them, their weapons unleashing bursts of energy that lit up the room. Ethan joined the fray, his shots precise as he covered Lira's retreat. "Ethan, they're closing the door." Lyra's voice crackled through the comms. Ethan glanced over his shoulder to see the circular door sliding shut. One of the statues motioned for him to move, its gestures urgent. "Understood," Ethan said, firing one last shot before making a break for the tunnel. He slipped through just as the door sealed behind him, cutting off the sounds of battle. On the other side, Lira was waiting, her expression a mix of relief and worry. "You made it." "Barely," Ethan said, catching his breath. "But we're not out of the woods yet." Ahead of them, the tunnel stretched into the unknown, its faint blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. Ethan squared his shoulders, his resolve hardening. "We've got the data," he said. "Now we find a way to use it." The tunnel led Ethan and Lira to the outskirts of the ruins, where they emerged onto a jagged plateau overlooking Tryon 7's barren landscape. The horizon was marked by the shimmering heat of the planet's twin suns, their light casting long shadows over the craggy terrain. In the distance, the faint outlines of Dominion dropships patrolling the skies served as a stark reminder of their pursuers. Ethan activated his wristcom, signaling the rest of their team. "Status report. Did anyone else make it topside?" A burst of static preceded a reply. "Kael, this is Voss. We've regrouped at Point Theta, 2 clicks north of your position. We've got injured but no losses. The Dominion's crawling all over the ruins." "Understood. Hold your position and secure the wounded," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We'll link up soon." Lira pulled out her portable scanner, analyzing the terrain ahead. "The good news? This plateau gives us a clear path to your team. The bad news? We're sitting ducks if those ships spot us." Ethan surveyed the area, his tactical instincts kicking in. "Then we don't give them the chance. We'll take the low ground through that canyon. It's risky, but the shadows should provide some cover." The two of them set off, moving swiftly and silently. Every step was calculated, every pause timed to avoid detection. The canyon walls rose steeply on either side, their jagged surfaces bearing scars from ancient tectonic activity. As they moved deeper into the shadowed path, the oppressive silence of the canyon was broken only by the faint hum of Dominion patrols overhead. After what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing where a hidden signal beacon pulsed faintly. Ethan tapped a sequence into his comm, and a sleek, camouflage shuttle decloaked a few meters away. Lira stared at the shuttle in awe. "Earth has been busy." "This is just the tip of the iceberg," Ethan said, ushering her on board. "We'll need every advantage if we're going to survive what's coming." The shuttle soared over the barren expanse, its engines running silent. Inside, Ethan reviewed the data they had extracted from the ruins, his eyes scanning rows of glyphs and holographic schematics. Each fragment of information painted a picture of a once great civilization, united under humanity's banner, with technology that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen since. Lira sat across from him, her own focus on deciphering the text. "This part here," she said, pointing to a section of the holographic display, "mentions a coalition. It wasn't just humans. We had allies, dozens of species." "Allies who turned on us," Ethan said, his tone dark. "Not all of them," Lira countered, zooming in on another section. "This mentions defectors, those who tried to warn us. Their names aren't here, but the glyph suggests a location. It's faint, but I think it's a star chart." Ethan leaned closer, his mind racing. "If there's even a chance some of those species survived, we need to find them. We can't do this alone." The shuttle's comms crackled to life. "Kael, this is Voss. We've got company. Dominion patrols closing in fast." Ethan sprang into action, moving to the cockpit. "What's their position?" "They're sweeping the area near Point Theta. It's only a matter of time before they find us." "Divert to their location," Ethan told the pilot. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The landing site was chaos. Dominion patrols had found Ethan's team and were circling like vultures, their ships hovering low over the rocky terrain. Human soldiers scrambled for cover, their exosuits barely holding up against the concentrated fire. Plasma bolts scorched the ground, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Ethan's shuttle descended into the fray, its automated turrets springing to life and unleashing a barrage of suppressive fire. The Dominion ships veered off, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected resistance. Ethan disembarked with Lira close behind, firing precise shots as he moved toward his beleaguered team. "Voss, report!" "2 injured, but we're holding," Voss replied, her voice sharp over the comms. "They've got us pinned, though." "Not for long," Ethan said, signaling to the shuttle's pilot. "Deploy the drones." From the shuttle's undercarriage, a swarm of small, sleek drones burst forth, their engines humming with barely audible precision. The drones flanked the Dominion patrols, striking with pinpoint accuracy. Explosions lit up the rocky terrain as, one by one, the enemy ships were forced to retreat. With the immediate threat neutralized, Ethan moved to the injured soldiers, helping Voss stabilize them. "Good work holding the line," he said. "We've got to keep moving. The Dominion won't give us another chance." Voss nodded, her gaze hard. "Where to?" "Somewhere we can regroup and plan our next move," Ethan said. "And I know just the place." Hours later, the group arrived at a remote outpost hidden in the dense rings of a gas giant. The base was a haven for exiles, smugglers, and defectors, those who had no allegiance to the Dominion or its allies. It was here that Ethan hoped to find Captain Jarek Hoth. Jarek was a former Dominion officer, one of the few who had turned against his empire. His knowledge of Dominion tactics and technology made him invaluable, but his loyalty was hard-won. Ethan found Jarek in the outpost's dimly lit cantina, nursing a drink that glowed faintly in the low light. The alien was tall and imposing, with a ridge of sharp metallic scales running down his spine. His amber eyes narrowed as Ethan approached. "Kael," Jarek said, his voice a deep rumble. "I thought you'd be dead by now." "Nice to see you too," Ethan replied, taking a seat across from him. "I need your help." Jarek smirked. "You always do. What's it this time? Another lost relic? A death wish?" "Both," Ethan said. He placed the holographic map on the table, letting it project its intricate patterns. "I found something, Jarek. Something big." The alien's eyes widened as he studied the map. This can't be real." "It is," Ethan said. "And the Dominion knows about it. They're not just hunting me, they're trying to erase humanity's past. If they succeed, they'll wipe us out entirely." Jarek leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "And you think I care because if they'll do it to us, they'll do it to you," Ethan said. "Your people, your history, it's only a matter of time." The alien's gaze hardened. "What's the plan?" Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "We fight back. We find allies. We secure the ruins. And we show the galaxy that humanity isn't done yet." Jarek was silent for a long moment. Then he drained his drink and stood. "You're insane, Kyle. But if you're right, this could change everything." He extended a hand, and Ethan shook it. "Welcome to the team." As the outpost buzzed with activity, humans and aliens preparing for the battles to come, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. The path ahead was treacherous, but they weren't alone anymore. And for the first time in centuries, humanity had a chance to reclaim its place among the stars. The hidden outpost became a flurry of activity as Ethan Kael's ragtag alliance mobilized. Humans and alien defectors worked side by side, repairing ships, stockpiling supplies, and sharing intelligence about the Dravak Dominion's movements. Every corner of the base buzzed with urgency, the weight of their mission pressing down on everyone present. Ethan stood in the central command room, surrounded by holographic projections of star maps, tactical overlays, and ancient schematics retrieved from the ruins. At his side, Lira Volen deciphered cryptic symbols, her fingers flying across a console as she cross-referenced the data. "We're running out of time," Ethan said, his gaze fixed on the hologram of Tryon 7. A massive red marker indicated the growing Dominion fleet orbiting the planet. "They've reinforced their blockade. If we don't act soon, they'll strip the ruins clean, or worse, destroy them outright." Lira glanced up, her expression weary but determined. "We've made progress on the defense system, but it's incomplete. The ruins were designed to function as a whole, and we only have fragments of the original schematics. Without the missing components, the system won't operate at full capacity." Jarek Hoth, standing opposite Ethan, crossed his arms. His amber eyes glinted with a mix of skepticism and frustration. "Then we improvise. Half a system is better than none. The Dominion won't wait for us to figure this out. Ethan shook his head. If we activate it prematurely and it fails, we lose everything. We need to buy more time. Buy time with what? Jarek snapped. We've got a handful of ships, a skeleton crew, and no guarantee this ancient tech will even work. You're betting everything on a gamble, Kael. It's not a gamble, Ethan shot back. It's the only option we have. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, Lira intervened, her voice calm but firm. We don't have to use the defense system as a weapon yet. If we can activate its shields, it might hold off the Dominion long enough for us to finish repairs and decipher the remaining schematics. Ethan nodded. Then that's the plan. Jarek, can your team handle fortifying the ruins' outer perimeter? Jarek's lips curled into a grim smile. I've faced worse odds. We'll hold the line. As night fell over the outpost, the final preparations began. Engineers fine-tuned ancient mechanisms, their tools sparking against the enigmatic materials of the ruins. Soldiers, human and alien alike, set up makeshift barricades and deployed automated turrets along key choke points. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and sweat, the quiet hum of determination palpable. Ethan walked through the base, checking on the progress of each team. He stopped by the hangar, where a group of pilots prepared their ships for battle. Among them was Voss, her exosuit gleaming under the harsh lights. "You ready for this?" Ethan asked. Voss grinned, though her eyes betrayed her nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be. You've got a habit of throwing us into impossible situations, you know." Ethan chuckled. "And yet, here you are." She clapped him on the shoulder. "Wouldn't be anywhere else." In the adjacent chamber, Lira worked tirelessly alongside a team of linguists and engineers, her focus unwavering. Ethan approached her, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "You should get some rest," he said gently. She shook her head. "There's no time. I'm close to unlocking the primary power core, but the system's language is unlike anything I've seen before. It's almost alive." Ethan frowned. "Alive?" Lira nodded, her gaze distant. "The glyphs adapt as I decode them. It's as if the system is learning from me. Whatever the ancients created, it's more than just technology. It's symbiotic." The thought sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "Can we control it?" "I think so," Lira said. "But it's going to take precision. One wrong command could overload the entire system." "Then we'll get you the time you need," Ethan said. "Just make sure it's worth it." Hours later, the Dominion fleet began its approach. The sky above the ruins darkened as massive warships descended through the atmosphere, their engines roaring like thunder. Swarms of fighter craft preceded them, their sleek forms cutting through the clouds. The first wave struck hard. Dominion ground forces deployed from dropships, their insectoid soldiers advancing with ruthless efficiency. Automated turrets and defensive drones met them head-on, the battlefield erupting in a cacophony of plasma fire and explosions. Jarek led the front line, his towering frame a rallying point for the defenders. His voice boomed over the comms, directing squads to hold key positions and counter-flanking maneuvers. Despite their limited numbers, the defenders fought with ferocity, using the ruins' terrain to their advantage. Meanwhile, in the control chamber deep within the ruins, Lira and her team worked frantically. The glyphs on the console glowed brighter with each passing moment, their patterns shifting in response to her inputs. "Lira, status?" Ethan's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm close," she replied, sweat dripping down her brow. "The shields are almost online, but the system's resisting me. It's like it's testing me." "Keep at it," Ethan said. "We're holding, but we won't last forever." Above ground, the battle intensified. Dominion forces pushed closer to the ruins' heart, their superior numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Ethan joined the fight, his energy rifle firing in precise bursts as he coordinated the resistance. "Jarek, pull back to the second line," Ethan ordered. "We can't let them breach the inner sanctum." Jarek's voice came through, strained but resolute. "Understood. But if you've got any miracles up your sleeve, now's the time." The ground shook as a Dominion walker, A massive six-legged war machine emerged from the haze, its cannons firing indiscriminately. Ethan cursed under his breath. They had nothing in their arsenal that could match the walkers' firepower. "Lira, we need those shields now," he shouted. "I'm working on it," Lira yelled back, her fingers flying across the console. The glyphs flared brighter, and a low hum reverberated through the ruins. Suddenly, the walkers' cannon swiveled toward the control chamber. Ethan's heart raced. If the chamber was destroyed, everything they had fought for would be lost. But before the walker could fire, a massive energy field erupted around the ruins, shimmering like a crystalline dome. The walker's shot dissipated harmlessly against the shield, and the defenders let out a collective cheer. "Shields are up," Lira announced, her voice filled with relief. "But they're unstable. I need more time to stabilize the power core." Ethan grinned despite the chaos. "You've just bought us a fighting chance." With the shields in place, the defenders regrouped, using the respite to fortify their positions and tend to the wounded. Ethan knew the Dominion wouldn't back down, but for the first time he felt the tide beginning to turn. As the enemy prepared for another assault, Ethan looked up at the glowing dome that now protected the ruins. It wasn't just a shield. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a reminder that they were capable of more than anyone had ever believed, and they weren't going to let anyone take that away. The shield pulsed rhythmically, casting an ethereal glow across the battlefield. Dominion forces, momentarily stunned by its activation, regrouped outside its boundary. The air was tense with anticipation, the hum of the shield mingling with the distant sounds of preparations for the next assault. Inside the ruins, Ethan Kael surveyed the defenders, his mind racing to anticipate the enemy's next move. "They're testing us," Jarek Hoth said, his voice grim as he joined Ethan near the command post. The alien captain's scales shimmered faintly in the shield's glow. "They'll find a way through eventually." Ethan nodded, his jaw set. "Then we make sure they don't live long enough to try." The defenders moved quickly, setting additional traps and repositioning their limited resources. Automated turrets were calibrated to focus on bottlenecks, while soldiers reinforced barricades with salvaged materials. Every moment counted. Ethan knew the Dominion wasn't just throwing numbers at them. They were calculating their weaknesses, probing for vulnerabilities. In the control chamber, Lira Volen and her team continued their delicate work. The glyphs on the console glowed in shifting patterns, demanding precise input to maintain the shield's integrity. Lira's hands trembled from exhaustion, but she didn't falter. "Lira?" Ethan's voice crackled through the comm. "What's the status on the weapon system?" "We're not going to hold forever." Lira frowned, her eyes locked on the console. "The shield is stable for now, but the weapon system is another story. The power core is partially damaged, and the interface, it's evolving. It's like it's trying to make sure we're worthy to use it." Ethan's voice hardened. "We don't have time to prove ourselves to an ancient AI. Keep pushing." Lira sighed, but didn't argue. She focused on deciphering the latest glyphs, her mind racing to stay ahead of the system's adaptive patterns. Outside, the Dominion launched their second assault. Waves of soldiers and mechanized units surged toward the shield, their weapons pounding relentlessly against its surface. The energy field held, but cracks of light rippled across it with each impact, like fractures in glass. "Turrets online!" Voss shouted, her exosuit's targeting system locking onto the approaching forces. Streams of plasma fire erupted from the automated defenses, cutting through the advancing soldiers. The enemy responded with heavy artillery, their rounds slamming into the defenders' positions. Ethan joined the fray, his rifle a blur of precise, controlled bursts. "Jarek, pull your team back to the secondary line. Focus fire on the walkers." Jarek grunted in acknowledgement, rallying his squad to redirect their efforts. The Dominion walkers, towering war machines bristling with weapons, pushed through the chaos like juggernauts. One of them unleashed a blast that obliterated a turret, sending debris flying. "Lira, we need that weapon system!" Ethan barked into his comm. "Almost there," Lira replied, her voice strained. "I just need—" A deafening roar interrupted her as a Dominion dropship breached the shield's edge. It hovered ominously above the battlefield, deploying elite troops armed with cutting-edge weaponry. The tide of the battle shifted, the defenders now vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Ethan's heart sank as he watched the dropship's forces advance. Voss, focus fire on that dropship. Jarek, cover her! The defenders fought valiantly, their determination unwavering despite the odds. Plasma bolts lit up the battlefield, explosions shaking the ground with every volley. Ethan moved between cover points, directing his troops and taking out enemies with pinpoint accuracy, but the enemy pressed closer. In the control chamber, Lira's fingers danced over the console, the glyphs reacting to her input with increasing speed. Sweat dripped down her face as she worked, her mind teetering on the edge of exhaustion. Come on, she muttered, her voice a mix of desperation and resolve. The glyphs suddenly flared brightly, and a new interface appeared, a final sequence of commands. Ethan, I've got it! Lira shouted into the comm. The weapon system is ready, but I need you to direct the targeting matrix manually. It's keyed to your biometrics. Ethan didn't hesitate. On my way. Dodging through the chaos, Ethan sprinted toward the control chamber, his boots pounding against the ancient metal floor. He reached the entrance just as another explosion rocked the ruins, the tremor nearly throwing him off balance. Lira was waiting, her face pale but triumphant. This is it, she said, gesturing to the console. The system's ready to fire, but it needs a target. Ethan stepped up to the console, his visor interfacing with the holographic display. The system projected the battlefield in intricate detail, highlighting every enemy unit with precision. Target the walkers and that dropship first, Ethan instructed. We take out their heavy hitters and break their momentum. The console responded, beams of energy arcing from the ruined spire. The first shot obliterated a walker, its hulking form disintegrating in a flash of light. The second beam struck the dropship, slicing through its hull and sending it crashing to the ground in a fiery explosion. Cheers erupted from the defenders as the tide turned in their favor. Ethan's focus remained sharp as he directed the system, prioritizing targets with ruthless efficiency. The ancient weaponry was devastating, each shot tearing through the Dominion forces like a scythe through wheat. But the power core's strain was evident. The spire flickered, its energy output wavering. Lira, what's happening? Ethan asked, his voice tense. The core's overheating, Lira said, her hands flying across the console. It's pushing itself to the limit. Ethan gritted his teeth. We need one more shot. Can it handle that? Lira hesitated. It might, but it could also trigger a cascade failure. Ethan glanced at the battlefield. The Dominion's forces were in disarray, but their flagship hovered ominously above, preparing to unleash a devastating strike. He had to make a choice. Do it, he said firmly. Target the flagship. Lira nodded, her hands trembling as she input the command. The spire glowed brighter than ever, its energy building to a blinding crescendo. A final beam of light erupted, striking the Dominion flagship dead center. The ship exploded in a massive fireball, its debris scattering across the sky. The defenders watched in awe as the remaining Dominion forces retreated, their morale shattered. The battlefield fell silent, the shield's hum the only sound. Ethan slumped against the console, his chest heaving. We did it, he said, his voice hoarse. Lira collapsed into a nearby chair, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. Barely. Jarek entered the chamber, his armor scorched but his expression victorious. You pulled it off, Kael. I didn't think you had it in you. Ethan managed a tired smile. Neither did I. As the ruined systems powered down, the defenders began to regroup and tend to the wounded. The battle was over, but Ethan knew the war was far from won. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's strength, and they wouldn't let it go unchallenged. We've sent a message, Ethan said quietly, gazing at the ruined spire. Now we have to make sure they never forget it. The battlefield was quiet now, save for the faint crackle of flames licking at the wreckage. The ruins stood untouched, their ancient spires glowing faintly under the protective shield. Humanity had prevailed, but the cost was etched into the faces of every survivor. Ethan Kael leaned heavily against a crumbled wall, his rifle hanging loosely at his side. He watched as his people began the slow work of recovery, pulling the wounded to safety and extinguishing the remaining fires. We did it, Lira Volen said, her voice hoarse but steady as she approached him. Her face was streaked with dirt, and exhaustion hung heavily on her shoulders, but her eyes shone with triumph. The Dominion's gone, and the ruins are intact. For now, Ethan replied, his tone cautious. They'll regroup. They always do. Lira sat beside him, clutching a portable datapad. We activated a weapon they didn't think we could understand, let alone use. That changes things. It does, Ethan admitted. But it also paints a target on our backs. The galaxy won't ignore what happened here. Lira was silent for a moment, then held up the datapad. There's more. The system isn't just a weapon, it's a record. The ruins contain archives of ancient human history, our alliances, our enemies, and our technology. It's everything. Ethan stared at the pad, the weight of her words sinking in. The ruins weren't just a relic of the past. They were a blueprint for humanity's future, but with such power came immense responsibility. We need to protect it, he said finally, not just from the Dominion, but from anyone who'd use it for the wrong reasons, including us. Lira nodded. And we need to learn from it. If humanity is going to rise again, we have to do it right this time. Over the next few days, the ruins became a hive of activity. Engineers worked alongside linguists and soldiers to stabilize the ancient systems, ensuring the shield and weaponry remained operational. Medical teams treated the wounded, their efforts bolstered by salvaged Dominion supplies. The victory had breathed new life into the defenders, their determination stronger than ever. Jarek Hoth, the alien defector who had risked everything to help Ethan, approached him near the ruin's central spire. His armor was battered, and his movements were stiff from injuries sustained in the battle, but his presence was as commanding as ever. Kael, he said, his voice a deep rumble. I've been in more wars than I care to remember, but this was different. How so? Ethan asked. Jarek gestured to the ruins around them. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for identity, for history. You reminded everyone, humans, aliens, all of us, what's at stake when we forget who we are. Ethan considered Jarek's words, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You're starting to sound like a historian. Don't push your luck, Jarek retorted, though there was a trace of humor in his tone. Then his expression grew serious. The Dominion won't let this go. Neither will the other empires. They'll come for you. I know, Ethan said, but we'll be ready. Jarek nodded, his gaze lingering on the spire. For what it's worth, Kael. I'm glad I picked your side. 2 weeks later, representatives from several smaller galactic factions arrived at Tryon 7. Word of humanity's victory, and the power of the ancient ruins, had spread like wildfire. Once dismissive species were now eager to negotiate, to ally themselves with the humans who had defied the Dominion. Ethan stood in the main council chamber of the ruins, where holographic projections displayed the gathered delegates. Lira stood beside him, her role as the team's linguist and historian now more important than ever. The first representative to speak was from the Barren Collective, a technologically advanced but politically cautious species. Their crystalline forms shimmered under the holographic lights as their leader addressed Ethan. Humanity's resurgence is unexpected, the Barren leader said, their voice melodic and sharp. We once dismissed your kind as primitive. Clearly we were mistaken. Clearly, Ethan replied, his tone measured but firm. We didn't ask for this war, but we won't shy away from defending what's ours. Humanity isn't here to conquer. We're here to survive, to thrive. A murmur rippled through the delegates. Next to speak was a representative of the Elendar, an aquatic species known for their neutrality. Their image flickered as they spoke through a translator. The ruins you've uncovered are a marvel, the Elendar said, but their power is dangerous. How can we trust that humanity won't use it against the rest of us? Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. You can't. Trust isn't given, it's earned. But what I can tell you is this. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. The ruins are a part of our history, but they're also a part of the galaxy's history. If we're going to move forward, we have to do it together. The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, one by one, the delegates nodded. Humanity's path to redemption was far from certain, but Ethan's words had planted a seed, a chance for unity in a fractured galaxy. That evening, Ethan stood alone on the observation deck of the ruins. staring out at the stars. The shield shimmered faintly, a protective dome that symbolized both hope and caution. The weight of the past and the future pressed heavily on his shoulders. Lira joined him, her footsteps soft against the metal floor. "You should rest," she said. "You've been going nonstop." Ethan shook his head. "I can't. Not yet. There's too much to do." "You've done more than anyone could have asked for," Lira said. "You've given humanity a chance." "A chance isn't enough," Ethan replied. "We can't just survive. We have to prove we deserve to." Lira placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we will. But you don't have to do it alone." Ethan looked at her, gratitude and resolve shining in his eyes. "Thanks, Lira, for everything." She smiled faintly. "We're all in this together." As she left, Ethan turned his gaze back to the stars. The galaxy was vast, its challenges immense. But for the first time in centuries, humanity had a place in it again, a chance to reclaim its legacy and forge a new path. Ethan's voice was quiet but firm as he spoke to the stars, a vow that carried the weight of millennia. "We were never meant to be forgotten. Now we'll ensure we never will be again.